Republicans at some point? What other things
I
along those
believe
lines?
I believe we have been invited to speak to the Senate Republicans, and we will do so. Look, I think the president had. I think the president enjoyed the give and take on these issues of importance. You guys seem to think it was a worthwhile endeavor, and I think opportunities like this for both sides are important to talk through our ideas. I honestly believe, and I know the president believes this and said as much on Friday, that it may be very rare that everybody in Congress, 535 members, and the president agree on every single word in a bill. But there ought to be enough that we can agree on in a piece of legislation that can garner strong bipartisan support to solve the problems that the American people have.
Would you insist that the Senate, if you do it with the Republicans in the Senate, that it also would be available for live coverage the way this was?
We asked that it be open on Friday, and I wouldn't have any problem with it being open if we spoke to the Senate Republicans too. But let me say, look, I think the two biggest things that are on people's minds in this country are creating jobs and two parties working together. And I think there's no better opportunity to show the American people that we're serious about their priorities than to work together on getting a jobs bill passed, one that cuts taxes on small business, one that increases our investment in infrastructure to create jobs. I think we can show the American people that we hear their anger and frustration and demonstrate it in a way that moves the process forward by working together.
On the non-security discretionary spending, on one of the calls last night, I think Orszag kind of hinted at a veto threat. And I just want to get your take on that. When these appropriations bills wend their way through Congress and they don't adhere to that freeze, will the president...
Let me go back and see what Peter said on the call. I know that the president spoke broadly about ensuring that that we had, through the course of this, a non-security discretionary freeze, and the president's serious.
I think Peter was answering a question about whether or not the president would veto the budget, so I think it got kind of garbled because because it won't go to him, but then it went back and forth until line item veto and this and whatnot. But
again on Friday, I think Congressman Ryan presented a proposal for a line item veto that I think the president would be anxious to look at.
But I mean, just your chance for you to rule out veto threats on non-security.
I wouldn't in any way rule that out. No. Yes, sir.
Peter Orszag and Dr. Romer were very cautious to couch the president's economic assumptions as in the middle of what private economists predict, and yet you're basing about $10 billion a year in your projected savings on passage of a health reform bill that is at least in question right now. On what do you base your optimism?
We're one vote away from getting health care reform. We think it's good policy. And Wendell, I hazard to guess what your question would be is if we didn't take into account any of that in what our budget was. The president has said we should be realistic about what our assumptions are, but also assume if we're going to propose something, I don't think it makes much sense to not assume that it should be in the budget. Again, some of that got us into this mess, right? We had troops in Iraq. We had troops in Afghanistan, but we weren't paying for that on budget. That's certainly one way to look at how you do a budget is to have our brave men and women fighting half a world away, but pretend that we're not paying for it by not putting it in the budget. The president made certain policy assumptions and added those into the budget.
On another budget matter, Republicans have criticized the stimulus bill as containing too much government spending, not enough tax cuts, and specifically tax cuts for small businesses, which you seem to be embracing now in this second jobs proposal. Were they right all along?
No, look, I can get a list of the specific taxes that we cut. Understand this, when we cut taxes for 95% of working Americans in this country.
But they said
A
cutting
whole
taxes
host
for small
of-
businesses would create more jobs
Well-
faster, and that's what you're proposing now.
How about we do this? How about if I agree that cutting taxes on small business has the opportunity to create an environment to create jobs? If they agree with me, I got an idea. Let's have those two ideas meet in the House and the Senate. The president has put forward a plan to cut taxes on small business, for a tax credit for additional hiring. What better message to send the American people than both parties getting that to the president's desk so that small business in this country can start hiring and getting a tax credit? What better way to show them than, as the president will do tomorrow, let's take $30 billion that the big banks have paid back through TARP and give that money to community banks to lend to small business. That'd be another great idea. Let's reward small business by increasing our infrastructure spending, laying a new foundation for an economy for the future, building the highways and bridges and railways of tomorrow. That should have bipartisan support. All three of those things, Wendell, we ought to be able to do pretty quickly with bipartisan support because we're all on the same page. We just solved half our problems, Wendell, and that was great. Scott.
Tomorrow, Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullen are up on the Hill testifying about what does the president hope comes out of the hearing, and we'll be hearing from the president on the subject between now and then, or tomorrow sometime.
Look, if the president gets asked a question, I don't anticipate a statement other than what he said in the State of the Union. Scott, we'll have more on this later in the day on what we anticipate will be in their testimony, but I think you'll hear a frank discussion about the president's proposal to overturn this and the support that it has to do so. I don't want to get ahead of where their testimony is and the different aspects of what's involved. Jeff, I'll come back. Hold on.
As you know, on Sunday is the Super Bowl. A year ago on Sunday, the president had a bipartisan Super Bowl party here to sort of a kickoff the year. It didn't go so well. What did he learn from things that he can do now?
It's going to be a Super Bowl question. That seems patently unfair to, yeah, I was going to say. Yeah,
what does he think that he can do differently to engage with Republicans this year?
Well,
substantively, after the Fridays thing.
Not invite Steelers fans. Not invite. No, I'm kidding. Look, I think. I think that the president certainly was under no illusion that having members of both parties here to watch a football game was somehow going to wipe away years of rhetoric and mistrust. I think instead of, and I'm sure there'll be Republicans and Democrats that will come to the White House this year to watch the Super Bowl, but I think activities like the president did on Friday, exchanging ideas. You heard him talk about the desire to sit down and work together on these issues. I just mentioned a series of issues around the economy. Our problems are big, and only by addressing them together are we going to be able to move forward. I think the president wants to hear Republican ideas on how to get the economy moving and how to stimulate job creation. I think there have to be a series of give and take. There has to be a series of meetings. But I also think we have to understand, as I said earlier, if one side, either Democrat or Republican, is looking for 100% of all of its ideas to carry the day on either side, that's not necessarily ever going to work. To take Wendell's tax example, the recovery plan had about $300 billion in tax relief, $70 billion for wiping out the alternative minimum tax, which if somebody would have posed 2 years ago that I can envision the future Republicans opposing doing away with the alternative minimum tax, I think people would have thought you were crazy. But we may not get 100% agreement on every idea, but we certainly ought to be able to agree on most of what needs to be done, and at least look for ideas and legislation that can move the process forward. Again, even if you don't get all of what you want, you can get enough of what you want and enough of what your constituents need on something like jobs